Welcome back to the Discovering Commercial Real Estate podcast. We're privileged to have commercial real estate veteran and chairman of New York City Capital Markets at CBRE, Bill Shanahan. Bill, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, John.
Of course. So before we get into business, could you give us a little background on where you're from and how you got into the business?
Actually, kind of interesting stories. So I was born and raised in Fresh Meadows, Queens. So 6 of us grew up in a 1,000-square-foot apartment. So you could say I had real estate in my blood because there was just not enough room. But I grew up in Queens, went to St. John's University in Queens. So I had work, home, and my college were all within walking distance. So a pretty enclosed environment. I got into the business in a very fortunate but unexpected way. I had a girlfriend whose distant relative was Brian Corcoran, who had just gotten hired to start the appraisal division at Cushman Wakefield. They had gotten a large assignment, the World Trade Center, as one of their first assignments. And obviously, with the number of leases, they needed somebody at that time that knew how to communicate with a mainframe computer. So he asked me, "What do you know about real estate?" I said, "Brian, honestly, absolutely nothing." He goes, "Great, you're hired. You don't have any mistakes." So I started in the appraisal business at Cushman Wakefield, and it just escalated from there.
And I want to understand where you first kind of developed your sense of business. So if you had to think back to the first time you remember selling something or putting a deal together, what kind of comes to mind?
It was actually more, not so much the sales business, because I was in appraisal for 6 or 7 years. It was what I learned doing an appraisal, like working for Integrated Resources and doing their tax work, doing sale leaseback work for Goldman Sachs, and watching, I was only one part of this, a small opinion, but watching them put their deals together, communicating with their clients. And I think that was really my first sense of, this is great. I'm making money doing what I'm doing, but I don't want to write term papers anymore. Seems so much more exciting. So that was the first sense that that's what I wanted to do.
Got it. And I read an interview where you did with The Real Deal where you said that there are people your age on the transaction side making a lot more money, and you kind of were drawn to that.
Human nature. You always want what you don't have.
Absolutely. And can you tell us about the origin story of how you and Darcy Stakem kind of met?
Interesting. We were both in the same orientation class in Cushman Wakefield in 1980. She went to leasing, I went to appraisal. She had then gravitated to sales very early on. I gravitated to sales 7 or 8 years later after working in appraisal. And at first it was, very competitive. But there was one event where we were working very hard, trying to move up the ladder with transaction size, complexity. And the company went and said they hired a team from Eastdil to do the big transactions. And I think that was the turning point for us. We're like, we're not going to let this happen. This is just, we've been working too hard. Let's team up and let's take the handle
Join
on
forces.
this one. Yep.
Got it. Okay, great. And what's the dynamic like? How has that kind of developed over time?
Well, we both have different skill sets. I'm probably more analytical and in documents than she is. She's got a great flair for sales. I also call her the master of the obvious. Okay. Sometimes you go so deep into something, you miss the big picture, which she's good at putting the things together for the big picture. But I would say it's very complementary skill sets. We've also learned how to work with each other. You've got to do that. You've also got to learn to respect each other, which doesn't always happen. And it's been a great business partnership.
Awesome. That's great. And how about Doug? How has Doug kind of went in there and it complemented your skill sets?
I give Doug a lot of credit. He stepped into a pretty challenging situation and he's doing great. He is a great partner. Hopefully, one day he's doing all of this and we're doing less of it. But Doug has been he's been with us now 5 years or 6 years.
Wow. That's
and
great.
it's been fantastic.
And what do you think has been instrumental with his success in the team?
I would say a pretty high bar. If it's not perfect, it better be damn close to it. and also attention to detail. You know, you can't go far enough for a client, right? I mean, it's their reputations, it's their careers, it's their money. So you've really got to do your best job. I
Mm,
mean, you've really got to put their interests first.
mm,
And in this business, sometimes that's hard. You get a lot of people will throw something competing your way, and you just have to be respectful and say, no, you know, I've made a commitment
mm.
in this direction, and I've got to do my best job and live for this commitment and see it out.
Got it.
And I think that kind of reputation people see, and that's gotten us more business. It's gotten us better business, and I think we've been successful because of that.
Awesome. That's great. And you've been at CBRE for 22 years now. How
We
has
came over July of '02.
Okay, got
Yep.
it. And how has CBRE kind of been instrumental in helping you get to your vision?
Oh, it's been all us. It's never been the company. Come on. With all respect to CBRE, great platform. We didn't realize how good their international platform was until we got there.
Mm,
I mean, there's a Bill and a Darcy in almost every major market in the world, and that was a huge surprise, a very good surprise, but a huge surprise that there are actually competent people. They don't all speak your language,
mm,
but they all know real estate and they know their markets and they have the respective clients. I'll give you one instance, and we were handling the sale of Worldwide Plaza, and we needed to know Nomura had an option to buy in
mm.
their lease, and we really needed to know whether they wanted to buy or not. And we were doing this with Eastil. Eastil couldn't get the answer. We called up our guy in Tokyo, and in 2 days he had the answer for us.
Wow.
That's the kind
The
of thing
power of
that's right. The power of the platform.
Got it. Okay, great. And what advice would you give to someone? Let's say they're putting together their team right now. What quality should they be looking for, or what quality they be avoiding?
I don't know that. I think you have to decide, what business are you doing?
Let's
Right?
say
If you're going to put
institutional.
together a business, sales business, you want somebody that's analytical. You want somebody that's got sales skills. You want a team that's got a lot of heart,
Mm,
because sometimes you've got to be there for days at a time. You've got to give up certain things for clients.
mm.
Vacations. You've got to give up family time to make it work. So I think you've got to have a team that's cohesive, respects each other, and then you have all the requisite skill sets in that
Got it.
team.
And Bill, you've transacted on over $145 billion of a wide range of transactions.
That was last week's number.
Okay. Of a wide range of transactions in major markets. What industry trends are you seeing now that you've kind of never seen before?
It's really was the health driven real estate crisis by COVID. Had never really seen that before.
Mm,
What we're seeing now, the illiquidity in the market, we've seen that in the early 90s. The lack of financing, we saw that in 98 with the Russian bond crisis. So we've seen elements of different things, but the work from home, brand new.
mm.
I mean, you go back to the mid 80s. So that was Barbarians at the Gate, Bonfire of the Vanities. You told somebody you wanted to work from home on a Friday, they'd tell you to hit the streets, right? So that we've never seen. What COVID did and has changed the way people think about office space, that's all new.
Mm. And can you tell us about the first deal that you put together as an institutional investment sales broker? The first deal you transacted
So
on.
one of the first deals I transacted on, I got sued for.
Oh, wow.
So I had a relationship with the Bass Group, and they had done, this is in the very early 90s. They had done a transaction with the federal government. Good bank, bad bank. It was the Glendale Bank of California, and they owned an asset at I'm trying to remember now, 11 John Street, and we sold it for a few $1 million.
Yeah.
And one of the bidders who didn't get picked sued us all.
Wow. Wow.
So it was like, welcome to real estate.
Okay. And how about the highly coveted Slide Town? Could you tell us about that?
We actually represented MetLife in the disposition of Stuytown,
Okay.
and that went to Tishman Speyer and their investors. But it's a great asset, and it's unfortunate what government regulation can do.
Mm. And how would you recommend for let's say a broker or an investor navigate this world of government intervention if it's out of their control? How can they regulate this?
I don't know that you can.
Just have to
You
play your
know,
cards.
Yeah. I think you be active in politics, be active in the real estate board, be active in organizations that, can pull together the political power to change things. And no one person can do it themselves. So just stay active.
And how about the Trinity portfolio? What was it like to work on the largest portfolio recapitalization to date?
It was actually very exciting. It's a fantastic portfolio. Uh, real a real mix of interesting buildings, interesting locations. But you're also, in some sense, we're working for God, right? We're working for the Trinity Church. The most interesting thing about that is when we were going to the closing, we realized we had no deeds because this was given to the church by King James or somebody. So there were no record. We actually had to create deeds
Wow.
to affect the transfer. That was a first in my career.
Wow.
But unexpected things like that when you're dealing with one, big religious organization, but, properties that went back historically to when New York was founded.
Got it. And all said and done, the transaction was 3.55 billion.
Yes, total value of the transaction.
How do you manage emotions with a transaction like that?
I know this is if it's the zeros aren't the emotions. It's really, the anticipation with the closing, getting the bid accepted, going through the diligence. That's all the emotion. But the number it's a number.
Got it. Okay.
It's a number.
And you also brokered the largest office condominium sale to date, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, for 1.3 billion.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That was very interesting. It was basically two related companies, GE to NBC Universal. And all I can tell you is, while it appeared on the surface to be, a very smooth transaction, behind the scenes, it was anything but, because of differences in balance sheets and, timing with these corporations. There are a lot of external factors not related to the real estate that actually drive these decisions. So there are just things that come out of left field that you just don't expect because you're not thinking either like a corporation, or you're not thinking, or the corporation enough to understand their business to know, wow, I should have expected that.
Got it. Okay. And I would imagine that dealmaking at that level, there are a lot of egos and there are a lot of personalities that you kind of have to manage. What are some of your strategies for managing these personalities?
There's not always egos and personalities. It's more about understanding, what are the motivations of people, right? What becomes good for them or not bad for them, and how does that affect one side or the other of the transaction? So yeah, there's a lot of, when you see, the movies, show me the money. That's like everything else. It's a little hyperbole.
Got it.
But it's really more about understanding your client, understanding the counterparty, understanding, what are their goals, what works, what doesn't. So, that's part of the thrill that keeps you doing this.
Got it. Okay. And you work with the most sophisticated investors in New York City on a daily basis.
My story, and I'm sticking to it,
John. What's the best investment advice you've ever received from a client?
Oh, shut up.
Oh,
was the best advice I ever received. And that was, I won't say whom, a very well-respected person in the industry, came in and was trying to talk to me about something, and I kept trying to give him my opinion. And he finally said, "Do you want a piece of advice?" I said, "Of course I do." Shut up and listen.
Got it. Understood.
And that one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten.
Okay, great. Okay. And when dealing with clients, how do you kind of remain top of mind without being pushy?
I don't like the word pushy, to be honest. It's not being pushy, but where does the transaction have to go? Right? If you're going to be successful, where does it have to go? Sometimes you're telling people things they don't want to hear, but if they don't hear it, there's going to be no transaction. So if that's sort of defined as pushy, then that's what it takes. Is you're really trying to keep the transaction moving, right? It's about time. It's about the environment around you changes. These don't get done in a day. It's not like calling up your stockbroker and say, sell your stock.
Okay.
It could be 3 months, 6 months. Some have been 3 years. So it's gotta work in all those environments.
Okay. Got it. Okay. And how much of investment sales brokerage kind of comes down to understanding the asset, and how much of it comes down to understanding people? Would you say it's an even mix of understanding
It's 100% of both.
Got it.
If you miss on one or the other, you're not going to have a trade.
Got it. Okay. And what does your typical day look like at this point in your career? Is it structured, or is every day kind of a different story?
In this environment, it's very much a different story. We're obviously not as busy as we were pre-COVID with transactions. We are busy doing more consulting work and things like that, which isn't this. It doesn't have the same pace or the same sort of milestones and deadlines as transactions do. So I would say our day's a little less structured than it had been previously.
Got it. Okay. And is there such thing as a work-life balance for someone at the top of the industry like yourself?
Um, yes and no. It's not, you're not consistently balanced or out of balance, but there are times when you're very out of balance and times when it's like you're enjoying your break. You're in between things, or, let's say I've completed a transaction and, I'm not picking up anything else yet, but maybe I'm working with Darcy on finishing something, but I've got a little more time on my side. It's, you take the moments as they come.
Got it. Okay. Um, and when it comes to goal setting, how do you kind of go about this process for yourself and for your team? As high as possible.
As high as possible.
Got it. Sky's the limit. And what are some sacrifices that you've had to make to close over $145 billion in real estate transactions? Are there any sacrifices that you maybe regret making?
I don't know that I would say I regret making them, but at the time it was the choice I made. It's obviously family time, being at all your kids' events. It's sometimes just being in the moment.
Mm.
You're somewheres, your body's this place, but your head is somewheres else.
Mm.
So you can't always be in the moment when you want to be. It's your health. Probably wasn't, COVID was kind of good for me. I stopped. I was like, wow, got to change things up a little bit here. So it's not like you're taking from only one pocket. You kind of steal from a little bit of everything to create the time necessary to give to the client, to give to the transaction, to get it done.
Got it. Okay. And let's say somebody out there is 22 or 23 years old. They're graduating from college and they're looking to get into this business of institutional investment sales. What advice would you give them in regards to job hunting or being successful in the business?
Being successful in the business, patience. The one thing I see from young people today is, I've worked hard for 6 months. Where's my raise? Where's this? It's a lack of patience in escalating the career. I get it. I was in the same spot, but if you don't have patience, you're going to have a fair amount of frustration. Most young people think about it from their perspective, right? I've been in 5 days a week. I'm working really hard. How come I can't get a raise? Well, maybe nobody's making any money in this environment, right? So you should get a raise while everybody's losing money. That,
Doesn't make sense.
There's no connection there that was there when I was growing up in the business. You're very aware of what the business was going through.
Got it. Okay. And as far as the investment sales landscape, from when you started from today to this point, how has that kind of changed?
Wow. In so many ways. One, computers, big deal. We used to do cash flows with graph paper and calculators.
Wow.
Right? Model out a tenant, all by hand, add it all up. Hope you didn't make a mistake. The business has also become what I'll call commercialized. So securitization is really took hold in the 90s. And that sort of, that you sort of homogenize debt in a way that people hadn't seen before, but it also allowed for greater participation, both financially, job-wise on that side of the business. And eventually, through the REIT structures, they institutionalized equity. So those are the big changes in the industry. I would tell you financial structures, there were a lot of them in the early 80s, a lot of them tax-driven. and a lot of them died out and they didn't survive, but you do have different ways to affect the transaction that you should be familiar with. And I think those are probably the biggest changes in the industry.
Got it. And what do you look for in a new hire for your team? What are the three qualities that you look for?
Oh, skill, communications, heart.
Got it. Got it. What's your favorite part about the New York City real estate business?
Oh, I love the people.
The people.
There's nobody like New Yorkers. And when you really think about New York relative to, the US, and even relative to a lot of the creative ideas about real estate, the things that people do in real estate emanate in New York. So you're in this big idea factory with a lot of people who are all really smart, throwing around ideas. So it's an invigorating environment.
Melting pot.
Oh, it's just great.
Awesome. And who are your role models or people that you looked up to when you're coming up in the industry for inspiration?
Well, look, the person who hired me, Brian Corcoran, was an inspiration. Richard Fisher was a great mentor and a really good friend. I've had other people on the legal side that I had looked up to because they would take the time to explain things to you. I've had so many people; it's hard to name them all.
Got it. Okay. And who do you learn from at this point in your career?
I'll honestly say, I learn a lot from Darcy. I mean, we constantly ping each other all the time, and that's one of the great things about the business partnership. But I try and learn something from everybody I meet.
Got it.
Could be something bad, it could be something good, but try and learn something.
Always take away something. Right?
Take away something.
Got it. Okay. And how important is competition in your business for you to stay on your feet and stay active and stay excited?
Oh, I think it's important. It's not the only thing that drives us, but it's one of those elements when you put it together that keeps you on your toes.
Got it. Okay. And after almost a 4-decade career, what would you say is your primary driving factor nowadays? Money, personal achievement, family, philanthropy?
I would say it's personal and professional achievement at this point, and sort of bringing up the next generation. I think that's really, really important. Also, just contributing to company, contributing to community, just contributing.
Got it. Awesome. That's great. And Bill, I have my final question to wrap this up. What advice would you give to your 23-year-old self?
Grow up.